sun's not even up yet.
Oh, Apples, quit complaining. In my day, we were up even earlier.
The cart before the ponies.
Take a look at what I did last night after we made our deal. Woo! Pretty great, huh?
Where the apple lies.
Commendable costume. Now even got the bells right.
Thank you, finally! Some pony who gets my costume.
Luna Eclipsed. What do these episodes have in common? Each of them have made our respective worst list for the entirety of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, and there is a very high chance you disagree with those picks. And you know what? That's completely understandable. Greetings everyone, I'm the voice of reason.
And I'm Thespio, and today, for part 1 of our series end special of At the Screening, we'll be going over what we consider the absolute bottom of the apple barrel of My Little Pony Generation 4.
And in some cases, should not be associated with the word barrel. In fact, some of them are caked on the bottom of a spittoon. But enough beating around the bush. Let's get started with our first category, tripping over the start line. These are the episodes we feel got off on the wrong foot kicking off its respective season. Now, looking at our lists beforehand, I know we're going to get some weird and confusing looks because they're not the usual choices for worst openers among the fandom.
Exactly, because for the most part, My Little Pony has actually had some really strong openers, and they followed the criteria of what a premiere is supposed to do. Establish a status quo, or create a brand new one, and get us excited for what is in store for the rest of the season. These two openers are what we believe simply didn't hold as much water as their predecessors or successors did.
Now, if we were solely going on objectively worst premiere, I probably would have said the pilot episodes. I only give them a pass because it was just the start of the series, and there were still some things to iron out as far as the writing was concerned. Plus, the series premiere accomplished a lot as far as establishing our setting, characters, and eventual plot device for the end of each episode. I can't say the same for Celestial Advice. As far as writing a season premiere goes, this one does everything wrong. It fails to set up a hook for the season's conflict, it doesn't further anyone's individual character arcs for the series as a whole, and worst of all, nothing was accomplished as a follow-up to the previous season's finale. Remember how To Wear Him Back Again just seemed to stop at Starlight's old village without a wrap-up or reflective conclusion? The obvious plot-driven choice would have been to progress Starlight's arc in sending her off to continue her lessons in friendship on her own. Instead, the episode goes back to the status quo as we started out in Season 6, with Starlight still as Twilight's pupil. And as much as I love Shadowplay for wrapping up Starlight's arc in Season 7, Celestial Advice felt like nothing was gained after the ordeal with Chrysalis for the main cast.
Yeah, I definitely agree in terms of Starlight and how they chose to not have her arc evolve here, and I personally think what hurt this premiere more was the fact that it wasn't a two-parter and fell into the same trap as Magical Mystery Cure, trying to tell too much story in a very limited runtime. But I want to say this at least. Despite how they handled the status quo, you actually failed to mention one character that was furthered along in this premiere, albeit late, and that's Celestia. We finally get to see little extra nuggets of characterization from the Princess of the Sun, and I think it was more than worth the wait. But I'd still call it second bananas to my choice for worst opener, The Crystalling. After the absolute migraine-inducing train wreck of the Season 5 finale, all this premiere did was fill me with dread and far too many questions left unanswered. You know a premiere is bad when it immediately jumps into Starlight becoming Twilight's pupil with absolutely no proper in-between period from what she was to what she is. Such as Twilight introducing Starlight to Celestia and Luna for approval to take her on as a student. And even that's tainted by the fact that role is kinda already filled by Sunset Shimmer. This premiere was the beginning of Starlight showing very little endearing traits as a protagonist, and becoming the show's rusty anchor that's holding the ship back, and the captain sees no point in hoisting it back up. And do I even need to bother mentioning Celestia and Luna's infamous line about not knowing anything about the birth of a baby alicorn, throwing multiple socket wrenches into what's already established? I'm sorry, but despite how cute she is, Flurry Heart just comes right the hell out of nowhere and is mostly a side plot despite what the trailers said at the time. This premiere expected me to care about new characters I didn't find all that interesting. It made the Crystal Empire look like an even stupider setting. The main six were shoved to the sidelines, and it overall just left me feeling hollow and empty.
Yeah, I guess I can see that, but the Crystalling did a few things that I found admirable that puts it farther ahead of both the pilot and Celestial Advice. For one, we had 3 well-written male characters, either as great comic relief with shining armor, a voice of reason in Spike, no relation, and a dorky, relatable recluse with Sunburst. Second, it gave us our arc for the season in Starlight learning to be a well-respected member of society, even if those episodes are problematic at best and atrocities at worst. Finally, it left us with a hook for the eventual season-ending conflict, albeit through the Season 3 method of blink and you'll miss it. Hi, Thorax. But let's move on to our next category, Too Bored to Care. These are the episodes too bland, cliche, or boring to really get angry over, and just give a heavy sigh at their existence.
Now this is an interesting category, as I found it the hardest to make a decision for. Whenever I watch MLP, above all else, I look to be entertained. Some of the worst still accomplish their goal of getting a reaction out of me. And even in middle-of-the-road episodes, there are still little parts here and there that I like to go back and rewatch. Sadly, that's not the case for Appaloosa's Most Wanted. This was one of those rare instances where right after watching it, I completely forgot about it. Trouble Shoes sadly isn't all too interesting. The CMC don't pick up the slack that well, and all it did was confirm that literally nobody truly knows how Cutie Marks work. I didn't even feel motivated to watch it again since, as it left very little impact on me. It's just that forgettable.
Well, I at least remember the moral of the episode, and it's quite mature talking about how some people later in their lives still haven't found what their calling is. It did try to put a spin on the old cliche of don't judge a book by its cover, even if it was the 4th time the show did it. However, there was one episode where I was just fed up with these types of stories, and that's The Cart Before the Ponies. Clever title, painfully cliche episode. As I said in my review with Golden Fox on Appaloosa's Most Wanted, the adults are useless/stupid trope needs to die. I am sick of seeing it in cartoons and other children's media. When the trope appeared on screen and it felt like the episode was just going through the motions until it mercifully ended, there was one thing I was yelling at the screen. Do something different. When they eventually got to the race, my mind checked out. Heck, you might recall us making lists of what we'd rather do than watch The Cart Before the Ponies. Here's one right now. I'd rather listen to John Cage's 4 minutes 33 seconds for a half-hour loop than watch the episode again. It is that boring.
Wait, isn't that musical arrangement just pure silence?
Exactly!
Touché. But yeah, I didn't care for that episode too. Not so much I was bored by it like you were, but more annoyed with how they took those cliches and just steamrolled them to the point they made almost everyone pretty dang oblivious, including the CMC. And we have the added insult of them botching up the moral of adults aren't always perfect, which was done 1,000,000 times better and growing up is hard to do. Anyways, on to our next category. I'm the only one who hates this. Pretty self-explanatory, but these are the episodes that, for whatever reason, they're universally praised despite any and all obvious overbearing flaws.
Okay, for me, this is an easy one. If you saw my best and worst list for Season 9, it was recently added to my growing list of episodes that I don't like but everyone else does. Alongside such entries like Do Princesses Dream of Magic Sheep, Fake It Till You'll Make It, and Once Upon a Zeppelin, is The Last Laugh. Not much to say here without repeating myself, so I'll just say the bleak setting was done too well, making the happy ending feel too spontaneous, as well as unearned. And every time I tried to laugh along, I felt more and more like Business Cheese Sandwich, having the inability to even chuckle at some of the jokes.
Well, you already know how I believe that the bleak setting was intentional to drive the message home, but to each their own. Which is more than I can say for what I think is the biggest wasted opportunity to show some much-needed development, the Parrot Map. Aside from further confirming that the Cutie Map is a frustrating plot device, it pretty much had the perfect setup to tell us more about the crucially needed in-between period from when Sunburst left Starlight to when Starlight took over the unnamed village. And what do they do with it? Well, aside from a throwaway visual gag about her having an apparent goth phase, and a throwaway line of dialogue about things being hard for Starlight after she left home, which, by the way, they never explain further on, they give us less than nothing. I don't know about you, but I hate it when shows do a terrible bait and switch in terms of writing. They gave us a really promising setup, and then they immediately throw it away for something completely unrelated. And by doing this, I found myself not caring at all about the social commentary of preservation versus gentrification. And that's a real shame because it's a really good story idea. Yes, we're shown that Starlight has a slightly patronizing father that does nothing but coddle her. But they don't give it the proper attention it deserves whatsoever. And even from what we are given, it makes Starlight look even worse and practically retconned her already pathetic excuse for a backstory. And at the end, I felt like all this episode did was waste my time and raise more questions than it answered, if any at all. Plus, the whole trying to reconnect with a family member despite them growing up story, that was done much better with Rarity and Sweetie Belle in Forever Philly.
Well, I at least got something out of it, as I've mentioned before that Stellar Flare acts just like my mom, but yeah, that is understandable. Now, this next category is probably going to get us more heat than the previous one, not worth the hype. The dreaded O-word returns, as these episodes we think are fine on their own, but the fandom puts them so high on a pedestal we have to call them overrated. Yeah, that happens a lot when I say that word.
Uh-huh. And the fact I'm going first this time already has me on edge. 'Cause I'm gonna let you guys know right now, you're not gonna like it. You're really not gonna like my choice. Now, let me at least preface this by saying I can tell what it was going for. I do understand it hits close to home for a lot of people. It tackles a really difficult subject, and it's a much-needed plot point for the story arc of one of our main characters. And trust me, upon first viewing around the time it aired, I too was all aboard the hype train to declare it one of the best in the whole show. But sadly, as time passed and I thought about it more, I hate to say it, but Amending Fences isn't as flawless as you think it is, guys. Yeah, I know, but just hear me out, okay? Now, on the one hand, it was a clever way of having Moondancer be a mirror to Twilight if she never went to Ponyville and given friendship a chance. But on the other, it seemed like Twilight was being kinda pushy towards Moondancer. As a result, it was sending some unintentional implications that says introversion, solitude, and not being social is a crime, which I believe was tackled with a lot more respect in Scaremaster. To quote what Twilight said while she was in Moondancer's book, "I was so caught up in my own studying, I didn't take your feelings into account." At no point did Twilight ever mention she left because she thought the world was gonna end due to an oncoming threat from the former Princess of the Night. I think Ponies would be a bit more understanding had they been told that. Plus, let's be honest, Celestia kinda ordered Twilight to make new friends, not so much of her own freedom of choice. Here, Twilight just kind of makes a whole bunch of blind assumptions about Moondancer's feelings without actually asking her. I mean, sure, Moondancer's apathy would have been a chore to break through, but I think it would have worked better if Twilight at least tried to without it seeming like she's in her face about it. Now, don't get me wrong. I do admire Twilight for having good intentions and taking the actions to make it up to Moondancer despite her not knowing she hurt her, which I can really relate to. And I do agree that Moondancer's breakdown scene was a very powerful and emotional moment that was executed tremendously well. But then we see Moondancer has a sister. Glad to know she was a great deal of help in this. And then Twilight promises to come back and visit soon. And she does. 4 seasons later. By accident. So, while the ending scene in Amending Fences was great, and it does have amazing ideas attached to it, plus Minuet is one of the most adorable background characters ever, I sadly have issues with certain parts of its execution, and it should have had a bit more polishing to make it really as perfect as everyone says it is.
So, show of hooves, who's surprised to hear my pick for an overrated episode involves Luna? Yeah, about what I thought. I've had my meltdowns about how Luna wasn't all that she was cracked up to be. Just look at my collaboration with Silverquill on Do Princess's Dream of Magic Sheep. But there was a time I was kind of hyped to see Luna not in nightmare form. The mystery of her real self was exciting to me. I wondered how she would stack up to the real Best Princess. Then it was announced that she will be a star in her own episode in Season 2. This was going to be awesome! Then Luna Eclipsed aired, and it was fine. Yeah, there was nothing really wrong with it. It's instantly quotable, the Halloween atmosphere is nice, the moral was fine, and Luna was just okay. One of my big issues, however, is the townsfolk. The pilot episodes cheer her reformation, and then everyone forgets on Nightmare Night that she was reformed and they go back to being afraid of her. Also, no one told Luna that this isn't medieval times and the royal we is outdated. Yeah, I know, 1,000 years passing is a lot to catch up on, but I'm just saying I would have preferred consistency between episodes concerning the townsfolk, which at this point has become a running trope. So, overall, I think Luna Eclipsed is nothing really to write home about, but everyone and their mother say this is the best episode of Season 2 solely because Luna's in it. So, the episode where Rarity comes to terms that she cares for her younger sister after nearly pushing her away, the episode where Fluttershy gains the confidence to contribute to the Pegasi tornado despite being a weak flyer, the episode where the CMC learn about the dangers of spreading gossip to the point where they write a professional retraction in the paper for their actions, and the episode that fixed the broken letter system while pushing the envelope for younger viewers with Twilight Psycho are all not as good because Luna started an average don't judge a book by its cover story. Look, I don't hate Luna Eclipsed. I hate the praise given to it over much better episodes that season.
Yeah, I can see that, and that's kind of the same thing with me. I don't hate Amending Fences. I hate that a majority just ignores the unintentional negative implications it carried, which at the time, I admit I fell into that trap too. But of course, opinions change over time. Unlike the choices in our next category, Lost in Translation. These are the episodes that had just downright abysmal morals attached to them, and our views haven't changed since they aired.
So initially, I was going to put Do Princess's Dream of Magic Sheep on here as an episode with a botched message, but that falls more on my problems with character portrayal rather than the overall message at hand. 28 Pranks Later is a different story altogether. The problem I have is it promotes the wrong message. The moral it wants to tell is the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Rainbow Dash acted like an insufferable tool, pranking everyone in sight regardless of consequences, so she becomes the target of a prank gone wrong to see how it feels to be on the receiving end. The problem is the episode takes this holier-than-thou stance on comedy and taking the safe route so no one will be offended by their humor presented. Apologies in advance for getting on the soapbox again, but humor is subjective. One person's tastes are not always going to align with another. The episode even states that not everyone will align with certain types of jokes. However, Rarity says everyone has their likes and dislikes, and then 30 seconds later tells Rainbow to find a joke everyone enjoys, or don't be funny at all.
That's not a choice, that's an ultimatum. We both know I don't know what that word means. Obviously not.
It gets even worse when they turn a harmless gotcha prank into a health scare just to give Rainbow a piece of her own medicine. This is the equivalent of getting Silverquill to stop telling puns by telling a pun so bad it gives him an aneurysm. That's a bit of an overreaction. Bottom line, the episode turned a moral about knowing who your audience is and treating others the way you want to be treated into a moral of don't even make an attempt at being funny because you might hurt someone's feelings.
While I don't disagree with that stance, as someone who personally doesn't enjoy being pranked, I saw that episode as Rainbow Dash receiving a lethal overdose of much-deserved karma. I mean, come on. A lot of this insensitive mayor's pranks weren't the levels of safe, good, clean fun from Griffin the Brush-Off. In fact, a lot of them were pretty dangerous, if not illegal. Speaking of which, do you know what should be illegal in Ponyville? Having Trixie and Starlight Glimmer be anywhere near each other or telling Big Mac not to talk. Otherwise, you'd get disasters like No Second Prances and Where the Apple Lies, which I'm declaring as a tie for this category, as they both not only have terrible morals, but are extremely painful to watch. Now, the message of giving second chances and doing it well is a very tricky tightrope to get across. But No Second Prances just went up and tried running across it without any proper sense of balance, and, surprise, surprise, it fell to the ground like an anvil. I do agree that giving second chances to offenders is important. When warranted. The crucial catalyst that is mandatory for chances to be granted is earning them. And I hate to say it, actually, no I don't, not everyone deserves second chances. You can deny it all you want, but hopeless cases do exist. And Starlight and Trixie are the perfect examples of that. The sheer lack of direct punishment for Starlight not only completely ignores the other crucial moral of actions have consequences, but it hurts her overall character presentation because we don't see her endure anything or even remotely try to atone for her terrible deeds in Season 5. And it makes it really hard to empathize with her supposed struggles. In other words, the show immediately expected us to call her a good guy now because they decided to tell, not show. And ever since then, Starlight fell into a trap where she was constantly relapsing and continues to jump the gun well beyond the point where she should have learned not to. Now, let me ask you this. How many chances can you give someone to change for the better when every time they keep botching it up? I don't know about you, but as someone who has a very small patience threshold, after about the third or fourth time, I would have no choice but to give up, because that person is clearly taking my forgiveness for granted. And that's also in the case of Trixie. I don't believe for a second that she learned anything or showed any sense of repentance since Magic Duel. And episodes like All Bottled Up, A Horseshoe Inn, and, spoilers, this one, are direct proof of that. I don't care what anyone says. In the case of Trixie being nothing but bad company, Twilight was objectively right. And the fact that neither Trixie nor Starlight have grown or evolved since No Second Prances and continue to be increasingly immature, it also proves that giving multiple unearned chances is the literal definition of insane. And then we have Where the Apple Lies. Not only does it throw the entire Apple family timeline out of whack, not only does it follow the liar-revealed plot tropes that also need to die, not only is its supposed main message about nobody starts off perfect and you have to make mistakes to find out who you are, almost completely unrelated to what we just watched, but to me, its biggest sin is giving a secondary lesson that could be summed up as so. Don't bother protesting or speaking up because what you say doesn't matter. Not only is that message just insulting, but it's just as barbaric, if not more so, than the moral from Fluttershy's micro-series issue from the comics. There was literally no reason Big Mac should have been complicit to AJ's increasingly ludicrous and eventually deadly lies, because everything he said about her awful ideas were right. In fact, he should have spoken up more to prevent this entire situation from getting worse to begin with, because he was telling the truth. Hell, this could have been an extension to AJ's Cutie Re-Mark story and how she learned to appreciate the very element of harmony she represents. But no. Instead, Applejack takes his facts as only opinions, consistently brushes him off like a fly buzzing in her ear, and essentially bullies Big Mac into silence. Yeah, I don't care if it sounds like I'm embellishing. This is what it felt like to me. AJ, someone's gonna get hurt if you don't stop lying right this instant.
Yeah, okay, whatever. Nobody really cares.
but...
Nobody cares. Oh my god, shut up, a million times shut up. I'm going to kill you. Shut up. Nobody cares.
Now, could Big Mac have been less of an obnoxious motor mouth about his objections? Maybe. But that's still no excuse for him to admit he should have kept his mouth shut the whole time when he had no reason to. People, I urge you, if someone you know and love is talking about a bad idea that could end in disaster, no matter how big or small, nip it in the bud immediately and say something. If there's a tier list template out there for the main six as Phillies, then Philly Applejack has definitely dropped down to F tier after this.
Huh. I didn't think we'd go .mov on something, but here we are. And speaking of where we are, the final category. Worst episode. No holding back on this one. All of our collective hatred goes into these episodes as they give My Little Pony Friendship is Magic a bad name. The floor is yours, Thespio.
Thank you. Now, aside from the ones we just discussed, there are several contenders to what I think is the show's absolute lowest point. I could pick Daring Doubt, for it had a botched execution of the moral, practically abused any previous continuities, and made me doubt Fluttershy's growth as a character. I could pick What About Discord or 246 Great, because both were extremely mean-spirited for the wrong reasons. Or I could pick Some Pony to Watch Over Me or Spike at Your Service, because both had the worst cases of out-of-nowhere flanderization and idiocy. But even then, each of those dishonorable mentions have at least a little bit of positive elements here and there. However, there is one episode that I believe, intentional or not, got everything, and I mean everything, 100% wrong. This may come off as a surprise to some of you, not so much for the rest of you who already know me. But even after several years have passed, I still have absolutely nothing positive to say about the Cutie Re-Mark. Never in my life have I ever seen a story in Generation 4 put together so carelessly, plot elements so contrived, characters so backwards and sloppy, and an ending fall flat on its face so hard like this waste of 45 minutes. It gets time travel completely wrong, and anyone who uses that BS butterfly effect argument should know that is never a good excuse for lazy writing. Twilight is at her stupidest and most incompetent. It took Starlight, arguably one of the best villains in the whole show, and just destroyed her potential and never recovered since. And how it tries to justify everything it did does nothing but get my blood boiled. Even the spectacle of each alternate timeline wasn't enough to save this god-awful two-parter. And you know what the worst offense is? It's unskippable. It's a finale. It's practically a crime to say it doesn't matter for the overarching plot of the series. And all it did was bring the overall quality of its ethics significantly lower. Not to mention, it sends several bad messages to kids that all add up to saying, you can get away with literally anything if you say, I'm sorry enough times. And as a result, it paved the way for other bad episodes to follow concerning redemption. Believe me, I want to forget about it. I really do. I want to call it just as insignificant and unnecessary as Appaloosa's Most Wanted. But I can't, as it's an integral linchpin halfway mark to the series as a whole. How the writing and execution for this atrocity got greenlit in the first place, we'll never know. But that still doesn't change the fact it was quite possibly the lowest in all of My Little Pony's history. It's so bad, I'd rather watch newborn cuties on loop for 5 days straight while being given the Ludovico technique. It is that terrible.
Okay, tone it down, Drama Horse. I don't think Cutie Re-Mark is necessarily that good either, but to call it worse than newborn cuties is falling a bit on the hyperbolic side. I did find some enjoyment in the what-if scenarios, and unlike To Where I'm Back Again, it felt like a complete season finale despite questionable at best, revelations moving forward. I was at least intrigued as to where the story would go in Season 6. Also, the episode didn't make me contemplate quitting the show. There's only one out of the many animated atrocities in the show that deserves that dishonor. All Bottled Up might be the most painful to sit through out of any episode, and Rainbow Falls made me feel like my intelligence was being insulted, but there is nothing more vile and insidious than teaching a destructive message in a show aimed at children. And A Matter of Principles deserves that dishonor. Like the previously mentioned Cutie Re-Mark in Rainbow Falls, it's an episode you can't skip as there are necessary plot points introduced that will be important come the Season 8 finale. Because it's unskippable, you are treated to a mean-spirited, humorless dumpster fire that makes you question, has Discord learned anything since Make New Friends but Keep Discord? He comes across more of a villain here than he did in his introductory episodes. In Return of Harmony, you could say he's, at worst, a troll who lives for disharmony and randomness because it entertains him. Here, he messes with Trixie's lesson with an Ursa Major and nearly kills Yona twice! All of this was done because he wasn't chosen as temporary headmaster to watch over the school. After all the destruction he caused, Starlight ends up apologizing to him for not accepting his ideas and rewards Discord by giving him temporary vice headmare status. What the f is wrong with you? Rewarding petulant behavior because someone didn't get their way is appalling. This is how you get privileged kids and have them believe that consequences don't apply to them. And say what you will about the Cutie Re-Mark, at least Starlight admitted fault and was ready for whatever punishment the main six deemed necessary. Not once did Discord ever admit to wrongdoing. Hell, we have the same where would the fun in that be horse when Discord says they'd miss out on all the delightful misadventures if he didn't ask for things. To have all of this in a children's cartoon aimed at teaching lessons in friendship and even life in general, there is no other distinction than to give A Matter of Principles the worst episode of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. To paraphrase a better critic than I hated this episode. Hated this episode. Hated it. Hated every simpering, stupid, vacant, audience-insulting moment of it. Hated the sensibility that thought anyone would like it. Hated the implied insult to the audience by its belief that anyone would be entertained by it.
And to paraphrase another critic, you're too nice! Ugh, I don't know about you, but I've had enough negativity for one day. Can we lift our spirits with the best of the show now? Please?
Yeah, that sounds good. Tune in next time as we close out at the screening with our end of the series best list. Until then, I'm the voice of reason.
And I'm Thespio. Thanks for stopping by the balcony.